sound a cheap watch makes when it shatters on concrete is surprisingly pathetic. It's not a clean crack, like crystal, but a dusty, plastic pop. A sound of insignificant failure. It was the last thing Arthur's Timex said before his head followed it down, making a much wetter, more final noise against the gallery's polished floor. I didn't flinch. I simply noted the small, spiderweb crack in the aggregate and the way the cheap leather strap had twisted around his wrist. A final, undignified pose. To understand the elegance of that solution, you must understand the chain of incompetence that led to it. You must understand that this wasn't an act of anger, it was a correction. A recalibration of a deal Arthur's sentimentality was about to destroy. It began 3 hours earlier, in the sterile, white-walled cage of a viewing room that belonged to a man named Silas Croft. Arthur was sweating. I could smell the faint, sour odor of his anxiety over the cedar and amber of my cologne. He kept fidgeting with his tie, a polyester blend that was an offense in itself. We were here for the centerpiece of the Hawthorne estate, a lost sketch by Egon Schiele. A raw, nervous piece worth 7 figures to the right collector. A collector I had already primed in Basel. Arthur, who had secured the initial consignment through some forgotten family connection, was our in. He was also our primary liability. I had placed him in front of Silas, our supposed buyer, as a simple test. I needed to see what kind of animal Silas was. I instructed Arthur to deliver a simple, firm, opening price, nothing more. I need to establish a baseline of confidence. I had explained to him in the car, phrasing it as a strategy we were executing together. Let him react to our number. We control the room from the first word. He'd nodded, but his eyes were watery. He was a sheep I was dressing in wolf's clothing, and the costume was a size too small. Now, under the gallery's unforgiving track lighting, Silas, a man whose suit cost more than Arthur's car, smiled a predator's smile. The piece has a certain raw quality, Silas purred, his voice smooth as polished marble. But the provenance is thin. This was the moment. The script was simple. Arthur was to remain silent, letting the statement hang in the air, forcing Silas to fill it instead. Arthur leaned forward, his fear making him garrulous. The Hawthorne family has owned it for generations. It's a matter of family pride, you see. Not just, and there it was, incompetence. He had revealed our weakness in emotional attachment. He'd turned a transaction into a plea. I watched Silas's eyes. They didn't flicker with negotiation tactics. They hardened with the certainty of a man who has just been handed the keys. I saw the deal, my deal, begin to bleed out on the white carpet. But then, my own eyes drifted from the men to the art itself, propped on an easel. I let their pathetic verbal dance fade into background noise. My focus narrowed to a single detail on the sketch, a charcoal line defining the subject's hip. Sheila's line was a whip crack, confident and brutal. This line, it hesitated. It was a fraction of a millimeter too soft, too timid. It was a forger's line, a line drawn by a hand that was copying, not creating. Time did not stop. It became granular. My mind, a finely tuned machine, began processing the new data, discarding old scenarios with cold efficiency. Scenario 1. A simple forgery. Silas is trying to pass off a fake. Discarded. Too clumsy for a man of his reputation. He wouldn't risk it for this amount. Scenario 2. A test. Silas is testing my eye, seeing if I'll spot the fake before committing to a larger partnership. Possible. But the play with Arthur felt too aggressive for a simple test. It was a dominance play. Scenario 3. The real Schiele was never on the table. This is a prop. The entire meeting is a performance designed to strip Arthur of his leverage and force him to disclose the real painting's location out of desperation. This wasn't a negotiation, it was a mugging disguised with expensive upholstery. The third scenario clicked into place with the cold, satisfying finality of a vault door locking. Silas wasn't a buyer. He was a thief with good lighting. Arthur wasn't a partner, he was the mark, and I was now an obstacle. The entire tactical landscape had shifted. The objective was no longer to sell the painting, but to recover it. I decided to intervene. The time for subtlety was over. It was time to seize control. I let the silence settle after Arthur's pathetic rambling. Then I stepped forward, drawing Silas's attention as if pulling on a leash. My hand went to the tarnished silver ring on my finger. A nervous habit I had repurposed into a tool for thought. Peter's ring, a memory, thin as a hospital sheet. Surfaced Peter, feverish and small, whispering, "They won't listen to me." That thought, the echo of powerlessness, solidified my next move. Control the narrative. I needed to confirm my hypothesis and simultaneously throw Silas off balance. I walked to the easel. My posture relaxed, my interest purely academic. "It's a masterful copy," I said, my voice calm, conversational. I didn't look at Silas, I spoke to the room. "The forger is excellent, he captures the angst perfectly. But he doesn't have the rage, you see it here." I gestured to the hesitant hip line. Sheila hated the body he was drawing. This artist was in love with his own skill. The intended effect was a grenade of confusion tossed into Silas's script. I watched him from my periphery, his jaw tightened, a flicker of raw anger in his eyes. Quickly suppressed, he was a professional, but I had bypassed the performance and poked the man underneath. Arthur, meanwhile, looked as if I'd just spoken in tongues. "Victor, what are you—" "Quiet, Arthur," I said, not unkindly, but with the finality of a closing door. I turned my full attention to Silas. "The real one is in your back office, I assume? Or are we going to waste more time?" I used deconstructed dialogue in my head before speaking, my intent to frame his crime as a given, a tedious formality we must now dispense with. This removes his power of denial. Silas laughed, a dry, rustling sound. "You have a vivid imagination." The intended effect of his laugh dismissal, the actual effect confirmation. His body language was a fortress. But I had found a crack in the wall. "My imagination," I replied, taking out my small leather notebook and a pen, "is less vivid than the notes I took during my lunch with a certain curator from the Albertina, the one who authenticated the Hawthorne collection a decade ago. He remembers this sketch. He remembers the specific paper stock. I wonder if this one matches." It was a complete fabrication. I'd never met the man, but a well-placed. Specific lie is more effective than a vague truth. The name drop wasn't for status, it was a weapon. I saw it then, the flash of calculation in Silas's eyes as he weighed the cost of calling my bluff against the potential exposure. He had lost control of the narrative. Now, we would proceed on my terms. The walk back to my gallery was silent. Arthur, bless his incompetent heart, was a storm of confusion and wounded pride. "You humiliated me, and there you called it a fake. What were you thinking?" I needed him compliant for the final act. I needed his weakness. I decided to use praise, the most effective tool for manipulating the insecure. "I was thinking you flushed him out." "Arthur," I said, my voice pitched with admiration, "your emotional appeal, your family pride, it was perfect. It made him underestimate us. He saw you as a mark, and it made him sloppy. I just cleaned up the mess." I watched his face in the rearview mirror. The anger melted, replaced by a pathetic, dawning pride. He believed he had been a part of the strategy. People desperate for validation are the most pliable of instruments. He's going to move the real Sheila tonight, I continued. He knows we're onto him. He'll take it out of the gallery. And you, my friend, are going to be the one to intercept it. I laid out a simple plan, framing it as his moment of redemption. He would wait near the gallery's rear exit, call me when Silas's courier emerged, and we would confront them. He agreed, his chest puffed out. He was a hero in his own mind. I waited in my car a block away, watching. The call came precisely when I predicted. He's coming out. Victor, a man with a long, flat portfolio. Arthur's voice was a high-pitched whisper of excitement. Stay there, I'm on my way. I lied. I gave it 3 minutes, enough time for the confrontation to happen without me, enough time for things to get ugly. When I walked into my gallery's loading bay, the scene was already set. The courier was gone. Arthur was on the ground, a bloody lip, but clutching the portfolio. He'd been the hero. He'd taken a punch for the team. I got it, Victor, he panted, holding it up like a trophy. He fought back, but I held on. You did well, Arthur, I said. Taking the portfolio from him, I laid it on a crate, opened it, and confirmed the Sheila was real. Perfect. All loose ends tied up. Almost. I looked at Arthur, at his cheap suit, his earnest, bruised face, the pathetic pride in his eyes. He was a liability, a loose thread. He would talk about this night forever, his heroic moment. He would be a permanent, sentimental link to a messy problem I had just elegantly solved. He was a risk I could no longer afford. My hand went to the ring. That's when I picked up the small, heavy fire extinguisher from its wall mount. Arthur looked at me, his smile fading into confusion. Victor, what's that for? He was a problem, a flawed specimen, and this was the only logical solution. As he fell, his watch hit the floor first, a pathetic plastic pop, the sound of a problem being solved. Later, Emma would be waiting for me in my apartment. She would see the dark fleck of blood on my silver cufflink as I poured a drink. She would ask why I was so late. I would deliver a calm, plausible lie about a difficult negotiation. But she would see something in my eyes. I watched her face, analyzing the micro-expressions as one would a painting. I saw the trust in her eyes begin to curdle, replaced by a flicker of something new. Fear. It was an interesting variable, a new problem set. And as I looked at her, this woman I called my muse, I didn't feel love or regret. I felt the quiet, familiar exhaustion of realizing I had another asset that would now need to be managed,